Before we get into today's conversation, I want to slow down and sit with something I kept returning to. It's the idea that black beauty, the way we shape hair, scent, skin, and identity, has always been both personal and deeply public. Our beauty rituals begin at home. They begin in kitchens, salons, dorm rooms, on bathroom floors, surrounded by products we trust and stories we've inherited. But at the same time, our beauty has never belonged only to us. It's been observed, copied, reinterpreted, and repackaged, often without the people who created it in the room. Tension between those two realities became the heartbeat of this much needed conversation. Because when you really look closely, Black beauty has always functioned as a kind of archive. Each era tells a story about who we are, what we've had access to, and what the world told us we could be. Also, it tells a story about what we weren't allowed to own. Growing up, I didn't have the language for that. I only really knew that beauty felt familiar, something that lived between me, my family, the woman that I admired. But when I really think about where my relationship with beauty began, it wasn't just at magazines like Essence. It was in real spaces. My mom's bathroom, a stylish chair, a beauty supply store that we would go to for all of our needs, places that felt like home. It wasn't until later, scrolling through YouTube and TikTok tutorials, watching shade ranges expand overnight, and seeing more Black founders emerge with products that finally felt intentional, that I started asking questions like, who profits from Black beauty? Who gets to tell its stories? Who gets to scale? And who gets credited for the trends that originate in our communities? But most importantly, who gets erased? As I worked on this project, I've spoken with founders who built brands out of necessity, not trend, retailers who's entered a system designed to keep them out, advocates pushing for accountability from companies who only recently discovered the value of inclusion, and consumers who've been buying into beauty long before the industry acknowledged them. But what I found most striking wasn't just the lack of ownership, it was how deeply connected storytelling is to power. Who gets to define beauty? In advertising, in magazines, on social media, shapes who gets invested in, who gets shelf space, distribution deals, and who becomes indispensable to the culture. Beauty isn't just a product, it's a narrative. And the people who control that narrative often control the entire ecosystem, which is why I wanted to talk to someone who has spent her entire career shaping beauty narratives and challenging who gets to be a part of them. Someone who has navigated the editorial, brand, and consumer world, and most recently, the founder world. Someone who understands not only the story of Black beauty, but the stakes of telling that story with intention. Please join me in welcoming Kayla Greaves to the conversation. Kayla, with over a decade of experience across editorial, on camera, and brand storytelling, she has truly done it all. From interviewing icons like Naomi Campbell and Halle Berry to leading beauty coverage as a former executive beauty editor at InStyle, her work also has appeared in Vogue, Elle, and Allure. In 2024, she launched her own award-winning fragrance body oil, It Girl, which became an instant bestseller and has been named Best Body Oil of the Year by Ebony Magazine. Beyond her editorial and on-camera work, Kayla consults for global beauty companies like Procter & Gamble and Estee Lauder, helping shape how brands connect with consumers. She's truly a multi-hyphenate, a storyteller, beauty expert, and creative force redefining what it means to show up authentically in the beauty industry. Kayla, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Diving right in, I want to start with the culture because Black beauty has honestly always been more than just skin deep. It's identity, it's history, expression, and yet for decades, those same cultural expressions have been filtered, rebranded, and resold by the industry. And I believe every storyteller has that moment, that spark where they realize, I want to be seen or I want people like me to be seen. Kayla, I want to hear your story. When was the spark for you? What first drew you to covering beauty? And why did it matter? But also, when you entered the industry, what was the state of beauty media? What kinds of stories were being told? And what did you notice was missing?
I grew up between Toronto and Jamaica. And where I grew up in Toronto, I was in a suburb of Toronto. And I was often one of one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't really have a lot of representation. I never really saw anybody who looked like me. And so I was just kind of, I was taught to believe that I wasn't pretty, that there was no space in beauty for people who look like me. And I think back then as well, when you look at products and ranges and the conversation around beauty, everything was segregated for Black women. We weren't included in the general conversation. If you were to go get your foundation at a drugstore, for example, my complexion, which is very light, was probably the darkest shade that you could find a lot of the times. Really only like MAC and Makeup Forever and like, pro brands were making shades for everybody until Fenty came around. So, for me, it just felt kind of like a full circle moment. I've always been into beauty. I've always loved glamour. I've always loved, the pleasure that comes from that, the, imagination that we build and grow from all that kind of stuff. But I never felt like we could equally participate in it. And so for me, it was really just to tell our stories in ways where we could feel seen, and not only, tell our stories in like a specialty kind of way, but tell our stories so we would no longer have to be having these diversity conversations, right? Normalizing Black beauty. So it was just a part of the overall conversation. We were included in everything versus just, having our own little segments or our own little sections kind of to the side. I think, things have obviously changed a lot now. Now we're seeing, influencers and creators, and the industry has become oversaturated in a lot of ways. A lot of it is starting to feel very salesy and advertising focused. And, advertising was always a part of it, obviously, but I think we're missing a lot of storytelling elements. We're missing a lot of fact-based reporting. We're missing a lot of that. So it's an interesting state to see where beauty is now.
Yes, and that's so important because the media has such a powerful role in shaping how we see ourselves, especially when we're young. There's a danger in what happens when the visibility is filtered through someone else's lens. And I think we've seen that play out time and time again, from the lack of options in the beauty industry that led to the creation of brands like Fashion Fair and Iman Cosmetics, to the lack of recognition those very brands received once the mainstream caught on. But even beyond products, it showed up in how Black people were portrayed in media. Look at like characters when we were growing up and watching on TV. As kids, if we didn't see ourselves, we learned invisibility. And when we did, it was often through a distorted lens. So those early portrayals, whether in beauty ads, magazines, covers, or sitcoms, shaped how we defined beauty long before we even realized it. So, going into that, how has storytelling and representation shaped your definition of beauty over time, both before you became an editor and later as you stepped into those rooms yourself?
I mean, it's always been personal, but I think that there was a time when there was a very small group of people telling a large group of people what they should do, what's in, what's out, what's trending, what's not. And now we're seeing a large group of people telling of, like, there's just more people with authority, I guess, in the industry, which is both good and bad. Good because a wider array of people can see themselves reflected. And I think people kind of understand now that they have the autonomy to make their own decisions in terms of how they want to wear their hair, their makeup, whatever. But then it's also bad because there's a higher chance of misinformation. There is a lot of noise in the space. Everything has just become, everything is very oversaturated, which makes a lot of people just not want to listen at all and kind of tune out. So I think that we're kind of in this place of two extremes, right? Like, I don't think that when we were solely focused on magazines that everything was perfect. Like, I think a lot of it was toxic, and a lot of it was very whitewashed, and a lot of it was, not really balanced and inclusive of people. But at the same time, when everything is now like super relatable, then you miss out on the aspirational version of beauty, which is, feeling like there's something to be attained, which is also some of the appeal of beauty. So I think now it's, we kind of have to find, okay, where do we meet in the middle, right? I think a good example of this is, the Victoria's Secret runway show, it went on hiatus for a little while. And the critiques were, the women don't look realistic. We want to see real women on the runways, blah, 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 blah. And now people are saying, well, they don't want to see real women. They want to see women who are aspirational. They want to see women who are like otherworldly beauty. And so I think, people understand that there is an appeal when it comes to aspiration. There is an appeal when it comes to having, a curated edit. There is an appeal to having people who have a certain level of expertise sharing these edits and curating and talking about what products actually work versus what don't. I think so often people talk about, oh, consumers are more educated than ever. And I would argue that consumers have more information, but that
Yeah.
information is not always the correct information. And it is not always helpful information. I think that consumers are very confused. I think they don't know what to use. I think people are just buying things because they're being told to buy things. And I don't think that they're curating a regimen that's specific for them, because there's just so much to choose from that they can't decide what they want to do. And everything has become, a lot of what influencers do. And again, there's nothing wrong with this, but it's a lot of what influencers do is advertising based and marketing based. And that's fine because those things have always existed. We're just seeing marketing in a new form now. But we also need people with objective opinions. We need people with expertise, and we need somebody to edit the vast assortment of all of these things. And you need somebody who's going to be impartial and educated on these topics. And it seems like those voices have been pushed out and only advertisements have been pushed in. And that's troubling because there's not a lot of room for truth, fact-based storytelling, and also just helping people to curate a regimen that's right for them.
Because in so many ways, Black consumers have become the new standard for what's credible. Social media has flipped the industry. No longer just brands setting the tone, it's really real community or canceled overnight. And where real ownership isn't just financial, it's cultural. So a rival review or honest critique can honestly shift an entire brand's narrative because trust now lives with the people and not corporations. So what does ownership in beauty look like today, and how has this new era of community influence reshaped who really holds the power in the industry?
I mean, I think that we all hold power in the industry, right? I think attention is power.
Yeah.
Traditional currency is power. Ownership of a brand is power. And when I say ownership, it means not splitting it up with investors, but you owning your brand. So you have the final say of everything without too many cooks in the kitchen, right?
Yeah.
This is what power distribution looks like now. If you're working at traditional beauty conglomerates, right? The power of having other Black people and women in the room, especially for brands that are creating products and formulations and whatever else for Black people, that's something that is powerful, right? So we all hold power, but I think in this day and age, what is most important is having an understanding for Black founders, not being so quick to call somebody a sellout or trash them or drag them for doing what's best for them. Having a bit more understanding of how this business works and seeing things long term and not expecting results in 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, that's just really what it is. I think that we all need to realize that we have the power to pay attention and to uplift the people who are doing good, to platform the people who are doing good, rather than spending time focusing on the people who are not doing anything good by us,
Yeah.
and that's the power that it costs you nothing monetarily, but has huge like benefits if you just do the right thing and give the attention to the people that deserve it.
Yeah, and that really shows how fragile progress can be because visibility doesn't always come with sustainability. We've seen it play out with brands like Amicole, where their founder was very open about the challenges of sustaining funding and having to close the doors. And even looking at Curl Mix now, which is now on the verge of closing due to rising costs, supply chain struggles, and just a lack of investment, even after early success. So, what patterns do you see when it comes to access to funding or opportunities for Black founders in beauty? And do you think those barriers are starting to shift, or are they just being repackaged in new ways?
Well, it's interesting. So, I mean, earlier, I think it was last year, there was an attack on the Fearless Fund, right?
Yeah.
Um, that's a problem. Things like that are a problem. There is a huge wealth gap in this country between white people and any type of marginalized group, right?
Yeah.
Black people do not generally come from generational wealth. We know this from slavery, like our ancestors were labored to work for free. Whoever owned the slaves kept a lot of that profit, and that's how these families got their generational wealth. Let's call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
So for Black people, not to say that they can't, obtain generational wealth, but it's more difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we go to take out loans from the bank, a lot of these loans are very predatory. A lot of these loans do not give us, benefits, preferential rates. They're not going to give us, a lot of leeway. They may not even grant us the amount of money that we actually need. VC funding is almost non-existent for Black-owned brands, and a lot of VC funds end up being very predatory.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of any kind of investor funding can be very, very predatory. So grants are really essential for giving Black brands the capital that they need to function. Now, I just want to clarify this too. The main difference between a grant and an investment is an investment needs to be paid back. It's essentially a loan
Mm-hmm.
versus a grant, which is money that does not need to be paid back. Sometimes the grant will come to the receiver all at once. Sometimes it's paid in increments, but ultimately grants do not need to be repaid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that being said, it's very expensive and it's very challenging to open a business, especially now when we're seeing, tariffs and rising costs and inflation. Things have just gotten extremely, extremely, extremely expensive um, to run a business, to open a business, and to have it be successful. That being said, of course, like consumers, of course, what you buy, what you pay attention to helps. But I think also for brand founders, a lot of what we have to do, I think, is build slowly. I think there's
Yeah.
been this precedence that's been set that things have to happen very quickly all the time. You launch a brand and then you have to launch X amount of SKUs and then you have to and do all of these things. I think that, retailers sometimes put this pressure on brands to have to say, okay, well, you need to release X amount of SKUs this year and you need to have this many sales, you need to do all of this kind of stuff. And that creates a challenge. That being said, of course, getting into the big box retailers is appealing and it's ultimately what people want to do. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, don't underestimate the power of, and I'm not saying that it's easy to do, right? But don't underestimate the power of building up your DTC community, direct to consumer community. Don't underestimate the power of starting with just one SKU and having that sell really, really, really well, and then slowly building and using that to build additional SKUs.
Yeah.
I think for so many of us, it's going to have to start on a little bit of a smaller scale if you want to do this without the predatory funding and the lack of grants that are hard to come by and all this kind of stuff. It can be more difficult and the pace may be slower, but that doesn't mean that you're behind. It just means that sometimes you have to just build low and slow as a Black person in business.
When the product succeeds, the system still decides who scales, who survives, and that's the paradox that I've been talking about throughout this project in this conversation. Ownership isn't just about business, it's culture. So, because we've watched this evolution play out in real time, legacy brands like Carol's Daughters and Mio Organics have been acquired by major corporations, sparking a lot of conversation about whether those moves really represent progress or loss. And for some, those partnerships mean scale and resources. For others, it means like a trade off, a step away from the community that they've built. How do you see those moments when Black owned brands partner with or sell to larger corporations? Do you see it as growth, compromise, or just something in between?
We have got to stop as Black people putting
Yeah.
down Black business owners who sell their company. Like at the end of the day, things have to be sold in order for us to gain the capital to move forward. Like you cannot, like we already don't have access to a lot of wealth, a lot of, any of those kinds of things. And to sit here and criticize somebody for selling their company and having access to wealth and to be able to set up their family for success and reinvest into their community is crazy. That is how business works. And the reality of the situation is that we don't own big conglomerates as Black people, right? So like it's chess, it's not checkers. And so I get so frustrated when I see this harassment, of of Lisa Price, of Carol's daughter, and whomever else. And say,
Yeah.
oh, there's a sellout, there's this or that. People don't understand how difficult it is to grow and scale a business. And when you can finally hand that off to somebody else, right? You've done your part, you've created your products, you've done what you needed to do. You hand this off to somebody else. You now have the capital, the network, the access to then reinvest in the newer generations of Black founders.
Yeah.
Right? How else are we supposed to have forward progress if we don't do that?
Get to see that, and that's what really makes this moment defining, because the next generation isn't just chasing visibility, they're demanding equity. And as we look ahead, what real equity and true equity and beauty actually look like, let's talk about that, the future face of beauty. So we're in a time where Black founders, creatives, and consumers are really rewriting what the beauty industry looks like from the inside out. We've seen brands like Topicals, Pattern, and the Lip Bar proving that innovation and integrity can coexist, that beauty rooted in culture can also thrive. So when you think about the future of beauty, what does true equity look like to you? What would it take for the industry to not only celebrate Black culture, but actually share the power that profits that come from it? Also seeing a shift in how people consume beauty. Gen Z, especially, is pushing for brands that reflect their values, sustainability, inclusivity, and social impact. How do you see that shaping the next era of beauty where culture, community, and commerce all intersect together?
Well, I think that we need to understand the power that the Black community has here, right? Again, Black women are the highest consumers of beauty in the country, but that's not reflected in C-suites.
Mm-hmm.
That's not reflected in advertising. It's not reflected in marketing. It's not reflected in payment. It's not reflected in any of those things. So I think that we need to understand, the power that Black people possess in this industry and how we move so many things forward. But I think also as Black people, and it comes back to the attention thing again, we also need to realize our own power and not spend money at brands that don't care about us. Not spend, not give attention to the people that are actively trying to exclude us.
Mm-hmm.
These are the things that we have to do. We have to take back our power a little bit. And I think sometimes we forget how much power we actually have.
Yes, thank you so much. And just before we wrap up, Kayla, if you could leave us with one thought, what does Black beauty mean to you?
Beauty means everything to me because I really think that we're the blueprint.
Yeah.
So many trends that we're seeing today, Black women have been doing this for 20 years or more.
Yeah.
And so I think Black beauty is the root, it's the blueprint, and it births so much that we see today that goes mainstream that we may not get the credit for, but nothing moves without us.
Amazing, amazing, Kayla. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Take care.
Kayla, thank you so much for your voice, your clarity, and the intentionality you bring to every conversation about beauty. What you shared today is a reminder that the beauty industry is not just a marketplace. It's a mirror. It reflects what and who society chooses to value. It reveals the systems that have been designed and implemented for so long. Black beauty has always existed at the center of culture, even when it's pushed to the margins of ownership. We shape trends, language, and global standards, and yet the path to building, scaling, and sustaining within the industry is still marked by obstacles that have nothing to do with creativity or demand, and everything to do with access, capital, and legacy. What I hope this episode offers is a space to think about beauty beyond the products. Consider the infrastructures behind it, to honor the people who make beauty a cultural force, even when they're navigating systems that weren't built for them. And maybe most importantly, to imagine what it looks like if ownership and influence finally aligned. Because the future of beauty, especially Black beauty, is not just about more representation, it's about more power, more equity, and more stories told by the people who live them. I'm Amir Harper, and thank you so much for listening to this episode and being a part of the conversation that's still unfolding. This has been Who Owns Black Beauty? Until next time.